Well, welcome everybody to this episode of the Good Grain Podcast. We are glad that you are listening with us or watching on YouTube, so thank you for that. And today we have a great guest for you, Mr. Mike Baker, sitting across from me.
Hello.
So a lot of people have asked, how do we get started? And we're going to kind of dive into each of our stories. And Mike drew the short straw, partly because I saved over what we recorded of me. So, that's where we are.
So the end of the story just basically is don't be like us.
Don't be like us. We are professionals, but apparently if we're, just doing it for us, we don't do it well. So, Mike, tell me how, what was your first adventure into photography? How'd you get into it?
Yeah. I have memories, of having I remember one Christmas, my uncle gave me this whole kit, this film camera, that with this book, of how to take like funny pictures. So it was how to make it look like somebody's head had come off and they're like holding it in their arms.
Nice.
It was all composition. That was really how to make somebody look like they're a parrot on your shoulder. I just have a distinct memory of being at Congaree National Park, and trying to make my parents stand in specific places to take this, they're whatever. So that was my first, never, I was, 9, I was never thinking
right.
Oh, this is cool. People get paid to do this. No, I was just this is amazing. Cool. And also, a little further down the line, I'd 6th grade had, my parents bought me a flip video camera for Christmas.
Dude, so we got our boys, somebody had one, my wife had one when she was in high school, and somebody who worked with her at her school had one.
Yeah.
And we gave it to our boys this past Christmas. And of course, they dropped in some water and it broke immediately, but those things are awesome.
Yeah. I still have mine upstairs.
Does it work?
I've not tested it in a long time, but I still have it.
It
was awesome. It had the little flip out USB. You could plug it right into your computer, dump all your footage off. It was awesome.
That has to come to the Keys with us.
It
It
needs to happen. So I got a flip video camera, and me and my older brother would make just these. I would usually be the person in the video, and he'd be the person filming it. And I think we had some kind of tripod, but yeah, we would make dumb, we had, my parents had 2 pugs, and they were usually the antagonists in the video. So they were
the
bad guy.
Pugs.
Pugs are amazing. Don't start with me about pugs.
No,
pugs are great. So usually it involved the pugs being some kind of bad guy, and I had some kind of plastic gun and had to, destroy the pugs.
You didn't do your job. They still exist.
Love pugs. Pugs are going to be the mascot of the Good Grain Podcast.
No, they're not. You will find a new co-host. Sound like they're breathing through a snorkel.
And I also remember, my brother Tim, my older brother was very, he was into a lot of, this kind of media. He always had some kind of a nice, for its time, nice point shooter, nice video camera. And I remember making, stop motions with him, with my Playmobil cowboy, out west themed stuff. So we had the Civil War fort, and we'd have, I was totally in, he would tell me all right, move this one, an inch. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm making Hollywood movies. I was like, this is amazing. And I remember doing that and, spending a day, and it's 20 seconds worth of, but I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Now, does Tim still do anything?
So Tim he dove more honestly into the audio side of things. So he leaned into to music and entertainment.
Okay.
So not so much with, with photo, video, but more with audio and music. But I will say he has the eye similar to I think if he had chosen to, stay with a camera, he could be a, professional photographer, videographer, because I think he does have that natural eye. And, funny enough, I always thought my mom, is the creative one, which she is very creative, but my dad was always the one taking pictures, all the old home movies, you hear him, making some kind of, joke behind look at that, So yeah, so it's always Rick, behind the man in the camera. And, when they did a lot of traveling and the whole deal, and they missionaries for a while. And The photos from that were shot on a Canon Sure Shot point and shoot, whatever film. He bought the Canon Sure Shot right before they went to Ethiopia on like at some camera shop in New York, like some
Nice.
like just and then he had that for all their travels, and that's why they took the photos are awesome. Like I went through them recently and they're so cool. But so I think that, it came from, my dad was the one who, was into, into all the photography stuff. But
So photography and I guess kind of creative mediums have kind of been in your world for a while.
yeah, my family was pretty creative. Like there was always some kind of art or craft or, like music was a huge thing in our house. Like my oldest brother and middle brother too, they're both great musicians. My oldest brother, has recorded some stuff and, wrote originals and played in a band and, the whole deal, and super talented. And Tim helped him record all those things. So like, some kind of creativity has been, been around. So, definitely something that was nurtured, looking back now, something that was very much nurtured from day one of, of creativity is important, basically. Like it's,
I think that's really cool that you were in a position where that was encouraged and not like, oh, you put that down. You got, got to go to work.
Yeah.
And,
100%.
So that's really cool that you were able to have kind of that, I guess that atmosphere where it's like, dive in, do your thing.
100%.
So going from the flip, how old were you again when?
12,
11.
11.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, let's say, middle school-ish, I'm guessing. I don't even know.
I mean, at that point, it's like, I just want to play soccer and Xbox all the time. Didn't care about, the only YouTube I was watching was like walkthroughs on, like Call of Duty, Black Ops or something, But,
so what was
no photography?
What was the transition back to a camera now in your hands, right? Obviously, you're doing middle school, going into high school, just doing natural kid stuff. At what point did it come back in where it was like, okay, there's something here?
I remember using, I think I remember like I got to use my first DSLR. I can't remember who or where it was, but I remember using like a camera, and it was, looking back, it was somebody who didn't know what they were doing, and it was in auto, but it was still, it was like, holy smokes, like that's a fantastic looking picture. It's probably terrible, but at the time, I'm like, this is amazing. And I remember seeing that and being like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like that, not that I want to do that as a career, but like, that'd be a fun thing to have. So, I asked for a camera for Christmas. This is high school at this point. And, my parents, nobody knows what they're getting, right? They went and bought a camera. I still have it. It is made by GE, which is amazing. I have no clue what the model is. It was not a DSLR. I think it had like maybe a fixed 50, honestly. Like it was much better than anything I'd had, but it was nothing like a professional.
Still a point and shoot.
Yeah, a point and shoot. Took good stuff, but it was never anything crazy. Yeah, so and so I will say this, I got to see a little more of high-end photography because so the same uncle who sent me that photo kit, my cousin, his son, got really into like landscape nature photography, and so I got to see kind of his gear. And he's a little bit older. I'm like, this is you're so cool. Like this is the greatest thing ever. So but still nowhere where I was like, this could be a career. I didn't see anybody. I didn't know anybody personally who was making a career of it.
So when you were wrapping up high school, you did not go to college.
Nope. I went to 1 year of technical school, and the only thing technical about it is technically it was community college.
Technically, it was a school. So as you're kind of wrapping things up, what area were you leaning? Like what did you think you were going to go do, after high school?
I thought I was going to be a park ranger. That is what I was, I wanted to do. I wanted to be a park ranger or something to do with like recreation, outdoor recreation. Didn't know what that looked like, whether it was, working at a camp, whether it was, being the rec director for a school, like park ranger, something.
Now, did you have somebody in your life that was already doing that, or what kind of led you in that direction?
So,
because that's not necessarily considered creative.
Yeah, no, couple components. One, by that point, I'd figured out I do not like school, and I could go get a 2-year degree and do this. Also, I was like, I really like being outside and playing all the time. So, like, sweet, let's do this. Which the reality of it is you're in an office a lot of time, but. And then I wanted to be, I was thinking, park ranger. I like parks, like being outside. The reality of that is you're weed eating or dealing with customer service 90% of your time. So I was like, this is not super great either. Not something I want to do. But my uncle was a rec director. That was his career. I mean, he was successful. He was the rec director of a college, university in Texas. And basically the advice he gave me was like, if you want to make money in it, don't major in it. Do something different and then get into the world. I didn't know it at the time, but that translated to, when I did briefly think about going to school for photography, I remember what he said was like, and I was, at the time I was like, I bet that applies to this world as well. Like, again, not that it's bad to go to school for it, but by that, whole nother deal.
So,
but yeah.
So if photography was still, mildly on the table from being a park ranger, were you continuing to shoot stuff like in high school or towards the end?
No, I would say, I had like maybe shot some stuff on a GoPro, but photography was nowhere. It was not, I wouldn't even consider it a hobby. I mean, like I've never ever shot.
So how did it get reintroduced? So walk me through the gap between park ranger.
So high school,
different direction.
I had an iPhone, so like I was still shooting iPhone photos, but
Sure.
I was editing. I think I had like Afterlight or something. I was like, this is kind of cool, but nothing. So I'm in college. I'm like, college is not for me. I drop out. And then I start to work at a camp in Georgia. Again, at this point,
So you were 18, 19?
18, I think. Photography is not on the table, nothing at all. And, but they obviously at the camp, they had a media department. I got to see all kinds of fancy cameras and all this cool stuff. And, some of the photographers, everybody at camp, your best friends. So we get talking to everybody. And
right.
I eventually got to we were going camping and I got to use the camera a couple times and I was like, dang, this is really cool. And then I started, I'm like 19 at this point. I tried to start an outdoor brand. I started,
what was the name of your outdoor brand?
Appalachia Life. So that's what we're calling it. Our logo was like an A when the line in the A was a little mountain line.
Nice.
I was like, I'm going to be the next Yvon Chouinard. Like I'm going to make this, and then we were ordering like Gildan t-shirts. So, I've kind of came to realize that I was like, well, boy, this is very hard for a 19-year-old to do. And I also was like, I talked to a handful of, so let me back up for a second. At camp, they really, one of the big things they try to teach you was, mentors aren't necessarily going to come beating down your door, but a lot of people will answer your questions if you reach out to them.
That's a pretty good lesson for somebody,
which was huge. I attribute learning that. I mean, that helped me immensely, and it's still helping me. Like that, I had never had that concept before.
I think people would be surprised how many people are willing to give up their time if you just ask.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, when I was thinking about getting into retail, I talked to the guy who owned the camp and he had a friend who they buy kayaks from. And so I got his contact and set up a meeting with him. And nice. I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it, but he was like, he hated his life for, he was like, he didn't hate his life, but he was like, it's really hard. Don't have partners. He was very negative. And so 19-year-old me, I'm like, oh no, this is terrible. I don't want to do retail anymore. But in the retail process, I was running our social media and the whole deal. And I was like, I want to be able to take better pictures. And so I started borrowing the camera from camp and, the whole deal. And then eventually I just asked, the media director, I was like, hey man, like, how much money I make. Are you willing to sell me this camera? And he was like, yeah, sure. We're upgrading anyway. He was like, let's $200 and I'll sell you the body and the lens. And so I bought a beat up Canon T4i with, a cheap kit lens. And again, I still was not identifying as a photographer. I would say I was more so like, I'm starting this outdoor brand, but I want better pictures.
So your kind of reintroduction into photography really came out of necessity, right? Like you
100%.
You were trying to elevate something and, at least had an understanding of there's something missing. I'm going to do it myself.
100%. And so really what sparked it, the first time I ever shot pictures on a camera, and then I was like, well, this is really fun, is there's a Brandon Charleston called Live in Life Man. And
we have some of their stuff.
He is just really cool. I'm still friends with him on Facebook. Like nice. I reached out to him and he basically was like, we were like, let's do a giveaway together, because we have 400 followers. Like, let's like do this deal. Right. And, so he sent us, just a cool dude. He like sent us like 4 hats, like 4 t-shirts. And so I was like, I really want to like hook it up. Like I want to shoot some good photos and be able to promote this really well. So I borrowed the camera, you know, and shot these pics of people wearing this. So it was kind of my first ever experience with like putting somebody in the frame and like intentionally shooting a product and like finding a cool way to display the product and shooting it, you know. So it was
Now, were you still working at the camp at this time?
Yeah. So I went there for a summer and decided I liked it. So I stayed the whole year basically. So I was, you know, I was like kitchen staff, like, you know, then I interned with them. And basically when you're an intern, you work for like 23 cents an hour and you do everything. right. And you get paid in like chicken strips. So,
but you had some flexibility to at least pursue
100%. Like if there wasn't a group,
Appalachia life.
Yeah. If there wasn't a group there, like we worked somewhat standard hours of like if you get your work done, you're done by like 3:00 in the afternoon and you're kind of doing your own thing. Sundays off. So, I mean,
nice.
It was a flexible schedule.
Right.
And I'm in the North Georgia mountains, right? So like talk about somewhere you can't take a bad picture. I mean, like I walk outside, I'm surrounded by a bowl of mountains and there's a beautiful lake. And, you know, it was a pretty great place to kind of start shooting higher level photos.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought the camera, you know, I remember like, I don't know if this is like my first ever like actual photo session, but I'm still in auto. I'm shooting. So funny enough, I didn't intentionally do this, but the camera was already in a setting where it shot RAW and JPEG.
Nice.
And so like,
I was like,
I didn't know. I was like, why is this picture file so much bigger than like what? So I was like deleting the RAWs and like editing the JPEG. I was like, this is terrible. And I was like, why would I want that big of a file? But I eventually, figured it out. But I remember shooting. There's this mountain nearby that like for Florence, it's like it would blow your mind. But for Georgia, it's like this is like a puny little mountain,
Right.
But I remember hiking there with some friends, and we shot at sunset. And I remember that was the first time I ever saw a picture that I was like, "Whoa, I took that." Like
I made a good picture.
What? I remember I was totally by accident. It's in auto, right? It's like I shot like a silhouette of someone. I'm like, I'm an artist. Like I'm submitting this to, what
right.
some
this
kind
is
of,
winning some contests.
Yeah, like this
here.
is it. Like slap my, stamp on it and let's do
right.
it, But no, and after that I was like that, I'm in. At that point I was like, I want to take pictures. The brand, I think it already by that point I'd figured out like I'm not going to be the next Yvon Chouinard. So that had kind of fallen by the wayside. So
what was the deciding factor that kind of turned you off of camp?
When I was at camp, I was still, even though I was taking pictures, part of me was still like, I'm going to do camp. Like this is going to be, my thing. I'm going to do camp. But through the little outdoor brand that, opened doors, funny enough, like, I mean, they're still opening doors to this day. It's just crazy. I started communicating with Naturally Outdoors in Florence, where your wife was working, which ultimately led us to meeting.
Right.
And another girl there named Haley. She probably has no clue she's this big a part of the story, but she was running the social media for them at that point, and she saw some pictures I tagged them in because I used to shop there when I was in Florence, and I thought they were awesome. And she said, hey, like, anytime you take pictures, like, and if you would like to, you can send them to us and we'll post them. And I was like, somebody wants these pictures? Like, what? So that was like a big, like, mental, like, this is, maybe I'm onto
that's
something.
A huge encouraging moment.
This is kind of crazy. And so that, then I was like, every chance I had, I'm like shooting some kind of picture outdoors and sending it to them, and, and then they post it. I'm like, this is nuts. Right. And so that got me super pumped on photography. And then, still part of me was like, I'm going to be at camp. Like, maybe photography will be something at camp. I don't know. But then, I ended up getting a job offer, to go work at Naturally Outdoors and kind of help them with social media and the younger, getting the younger generation there, that kind of thing. And so I was like, well, that's really cool. Like essentially they're asking me to come take cool pictures, and, I get to work at an outdoor store with other cool people, and, like, sweet. And so, I moved after camp. I moved back to Florence.
And what do you remember what year this was?
Let's see. That would have been 2017.
Okay.
I think I started in September or November.
Okay. We'll call it fall.
I started in November.
All right.
I remember. So Right when I quit camp, my family was on vacation at the beach, and I went and met up with them, and I had my brand new camera, that was dented and scratched and beautiful. And I show up, and my brother and sister-in-law like have like a relatively new kid. And so, we're at the beach, they have some outfits. Like I was like, oh, let's take some family pictures. Full auto still at this point, but we shot at sunset at the beach, like a little bit of blue hour, and the pictures, I mean, like they're still probably some of the best pictures I've ever taken. Like, it kind of makes me mad because it was an auto, but they were like legit. Like I could show you, and like they're like legitimately good. And I was mildly editing. Like I think at this point, like I was in Lightroom, but I'm dragging sliders to like 90 or 100 and thinking they look amazing. The pictures were oversaturated. They had way too much clarity,
Sure.
but still like they were looking pretty good. So I shot that session, and I remember like looking at him, and sounds kind of conceited, but I'm like, people would pay money for this, I think. And of course they're my family. What else are they going to say? They're like, yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, yeah, you're the best.
But I remember my brother like printed off a picture, and I'm like, this is crazy. He printed a picture. It's nuts, And so that again, just like these little sparks along and along, like kind of kept reinforcing that this, the positive affirmation, right? That this was something that was good. That I was doing something that was good. And my sister-in-law is also a really talented photographer. She's never like done it professionally, but I mean, she has a really good eye. And she, and so for her to tell me the pictures were good, that was also a big, like, dang, she has a DSLR. Like she told me the pic, that's crazy. Start working Naturally Outdoors. I'm taking pictures, like all the pictures for their social media. And at this point I kind of reconnected with a childhood friend, Adam, just over backpacking. He had recently broken up with his girlfriend, so we had all kinds of free time. It's like, what else? What else are we gonna do? So we were going backpacking like every weekend because Naturally Outdoors was just like, yeah, sweet, go, go do it. And I remember, going on a trip with Adam, and he had a 60D and a Sigma 35. And at that point,
the art series.
What's that?
The art series.
Yes, he had a Sigma 35 art.
Okay.
And I remember looking at his kit. I'm like, that is the pinnacle. Like that is like that. I want that. And once I have that, I'm like, I'm set. Hilarious. But I remember him, his pictures were amazing, and he shot a lot of like skating and concerts, and like it was, a lot of low light stuff. And he is a fantastic photographer. Like I still have him on shoots, from time to time. Like he's great. But he was not doing it professionally. It was a hobby. He had nice gear for a hobbyist, but I mean, it was a hobby.
Sure.
And so we'd go backpacking, and I was still shooting in auto. And, we went on one backpacking trip to Linville Falls, and, and he said, well, let me show you this mode called aperture priority. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. It's hard, but he was like, no, trust me. Like, just let's set your ISO here. Let's, put your aperture at this, and the camera's going to do the rest. And I'm like, sweet. And that trip like unlocked a whole nother level of thinking. And
That's
like this,
funny.
it was like, it was mind blowing. Right. But we went on that backpacking trip. He showed me aperture priority, and, we had a lot of fun shooting. We just were camping, shooting pics, and there was 3 of us. And so we had 2 photographers and 1 model. So he was in all the pictures.
So one of the things that it seems to me has always been consistent in your photography is, the outdoors, right? And obviously from a social
100%.
standpoint, that's great and all. But from switching it into a business standpoint, there's only so many mountain and outdoor pictures you can take. So what was it like when you got back from that trip, right? I mean, you work for Naturally Outdoors, you're doing stuff for them, and now you've learned this new thing. What was kind of the next progression from there? Did you just start shooting everything that you could think of, or what was the next kind of flow in your business progression?
Great questions. I mean, it definitely still was, I would, again, like, I just don't think yet I was identifying as a photographer. It was still like, I'm an like outdoorsman, I guess, or something that like takes pictures. But, I remember there, going to a coffee shop in town, Lula's, and Jeff Felton was working, as the barista, he was behind the counter, and we had like met, but we didn't like know each other. Right. And, Jeff, Jeff says, hey, Mike, like, how you doing? I'm like, hey, Jeff, what's up? He's like, cool. Like, oh, gosh, he's talking to me. Right. And he said, I see your pictures and they're awesome. Like they're so good. He was like, if I give you bags of coffee, like, will you take pictures of it? And I'm like, what? Like, did
Like
I
free
just
stuff? Yeah.
did I just make it? Like, is this it? And, so I got 2 free bags of his coffee from his company called Batch 9. He gave us a T-shirt too, which was
Time
like
to quit
huge deal.
Naturally Outdoors. Go
Yeah,
on
I was
pro.
like, this is it. Like I'm like moving to LA. Like this is it. So he gave us a couple bags of coffee, gave us a couple T-shirts. And we, next camping trip, like we took them along and we were shooting all kinds of, product, quote unquote product pictures.
Right.
We put it on a rock and be like, dang, like some Peter McKinnon preset on, So that was like a big moment of somebody, we had that one of their giveaway where that guy sent us some products, but that was a big moment of somebody in like a business, somebody I looked up to giving me something and trusting that I can deliver him something good, which was like a huge affirmation that like I was doing something right.
Now, were you still investing in yourself at this point? Like, talk to me about what you were doing offshoots, if you will. Like, how were you progressing in your technical skill at this time? Like, was there anything in that, or was it I've just learned this one new mode and this is pretty much it and I'm the man?
So
you know what I mean?
yeah, so I'm not necessarily a technical person. Like I'm not going to be the person who, if I don't know something, I'm going to dive into it until I figure it out. It's, I do and I will, but really, I found aperture priority mode and I was like, I'm content. Like I can die here. Like this is,
Right.
I'm good for the rest of time. And Adam was helping me a lot with, he's, him being a hobbyist. I mean, he was teaching me a lot. But I was watching YouTube. I was watching Peter McKinnon, but I wasn't watching, like what I would call true like education or trying
Sure.
I wasn't actively seeking out, somebody who could teach me to take like to the next level. I still wasn't thinking about like this making me money. I was thinking about like
just more like creative concepts.
yeah,
and
this
things
is
like
just
that.
this is just fun. Like I really
Right.
like this, and there is something here.
So after you take these pictures for Batch 9 or kind of start with that relationship, what happened from there? So we're still at National Outdoors.
Yep.
And now you have quote unquote a client, while not necessarily a paid client or even considered that.
Yeah. So Batch 9 gave me a couple things, got me a couple bags of coffee, and that was probably my first experience with like truly somebody giving me something with some expectation to get something in return, right? So like first kind of client. But my first real client where they were like, we want to pay you money. So I'm working at Naturally Outdoors and this coffee company, another coffee company comes along, and they are going to start popping up in Naturally Outdoors. So they don't have a brick and mortar shop. They were just starting out, this was a big step for them. And, they'd been doing some things, some pop-ups with Naturally Outdoors at other events. And so I'd kind of like, I've heard of them. And I remember, we were doing an event where I wanted them to be there. And so Naturally Outdoors is a little store. Everybody wears a bunch of hats. So I was calling them about the event, and Mel, who is one of the owners of Bean Bar, I remember her telling me, she was like, hey, so you're Mike. Like I knew about you before I knew about you. She was like, I remember her telling me this on the phone. I'm like behind the shop, and she tells me, she says, I could look at Naturally Outdoors' social media and tell they hired somebody, and I didn't know they hired somebody. She was like, your photos are awesome. She was like, they're so, and again, I'm like, this is, wow, that's another,
that's really
crazy.
encouraging.
And then, I meet Mel, and, they're doing some pop-ups, and I'm taking some pictures for them just because like, oh, another subject, this is cool.
Right.
And then they eventually come to me and are like, hey, like we want to pay you, to take pictures. And I'm like, dang, like, this is it. Like I can retire. Like this is this is the culmination.
I've made
of it
again.
And I'm still on a T4i. With I had bought a Nifty 50 by this point.
Nice.
But I still have rocking the kit lens Nifty 50 because that's what I could afford. And the T4i. So they're asking. They asked me to take photos. So they were the first ever like paying client. Like they paid me $100 a month, which was like.
Yeah,
that's awesome, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I took pictures for them, and and Mel. So Mel was pretty crucial in kind of developing, some of my photo skill because she is very artistic. Like she has, she's done set design, she's done graphic design, she's done painting, she's done advertising, she's done photography. I mean, she's done film, digital, I mean, she's done it all at some point in some capacity.
Sure.
And she is an extremely creative person, and she would come up with these amazing ideas, and then it was kind of up to me to figure out how to shoot it. Which was a great partnership. So like it was, it took a lot of the pressure off of me trying to come up with concepts, and I could just focus on and hone in on just the technical, like how, like if she wants this image darker, like how do I make it darker?
Right.
Like if she wants to focus on this mug while she's pouring some like milk, like how do I, make sure my focus stays down here and not, like, cause I was using like the center, like auto, like it was.
So were you having to learn a lot of those concepts on the job, or were you getting like some pre-production where you would say, hey, this is what we're going to do on this shoot?
Oh no, I mean, it was literally like I would, just kind of be there, and she was like, hey, I want a photo of this, and we just kind of figure it out.
Did you have any failures on the job?
Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, 100. Not necessarily failures. And I think Mel, obviously Mel was kind of like gracious enough to be like, all right, let's not do that. Let's just do this. So there was never like which was huge, because there was never any like,
yeah, that's
there was never
really
any
great.
like, you suck. We're not going to do this anymore. It was just like, let's do this instead of that. So that was awesome. And that truly, I mean, like that was my first real experience with, there was some food photography, there was product photography, there was delivering images to someone for them to kind of be like, is this good or is this not?
Right.
And, and they're both enthusiastic people. And so like then having somebody like stoked on your work is a pretty big like reinforcement that you're doing something good. But yes, I mean, they were the first client, I mean, who truly like, from day one. But,
So at what point did your mindset start to shift where, natural outdoors quit being kind of the staple and photography started to surface as that career option?
I think, Bean Bar paying me it was kind of an eye opener, even though it was like $100, it was still like, this is, this is still, I'm making money. Like I'm getting paid for this. Maybe there is something to be done here. And then, so I'm working in Naturally Outdoors, obviously with your wife, Katie.
Yep.
Somebody, so you had a wedding shoot and one of your videographers bailed. And so, the day before, like it was something crazy. And so like all you had heard was like, hey, there's this dude who takes, some good pictures, like maybe let's see if he can do some. When you asked me to do that video, I was like, I don't even, where's video? So I remember you said, come over to my house. I'll show you the basics and then just like let it rip, and I'll use 10% of your footage. So I was like, great, amazing.
So you were the second shooter on the video
second videographer.
team.
So actually Kevin Smith, funny enough, was the primary of that shoot.
Oh no. What wedding was this?
It was the one with the crazy storm and like everybody got rained on. It was super muddy.
The monsoon wedding.
Yeah. So again, I'm super intimidated. I show up.
That was your first wedding?
That was my first wedding.
Oh my gosh.
So not only your second photographer is Steven, who is a fantastic, he's a great dude, but he's,
love Steven.
Like a great photographer. And I was the second videographer. He's the second shooter. And so I'm with him. And so we get to the house and I realize, I don't know how to change my aperture. And I look at Steven, I'm like, do you know how to change the f-stop? I was at like F8 in like a super dark room, and Steven's like, I think it's like this wheel. He doesn't do videos.
Yeah,
he's like,
he
I think it's this wheel. And so it was. And I was like, oh, the Lord. I was like, Steven's a God. Like, this is it, and so, I have a Manfrotto monopod. I'm like getting all static shots of like the shoes sitting on the floor, like totally terrible stuff, but hopefully it was passable. So, and Steven kind of, he kind of kept the mood light and was fun. And then, we get to the ceremony, and, Kevin has a camera that has like a monitor on it. And I'm like, that thing's intense. Like it was probably like a 5D or something with like a, something.
Yeah, I think
looking back, it was probably nothing intense, but it was the moment I'm like, and I remember you told me so it's pouring rain, right? And there's those white tents that they have at weddings. And like, you told me to set up the tripod in this spot. And like, I mean, fair to my defense, I like went to the spot, but it's like pouring rain on the camera. And I remember you coming over and like, let's just back it up like a foot. Like, let's just not have rain going directly on the lens. And I was like, oh no, I ruined the camera. Like, I don't know what's going on. And I remember you just telling me like, here's where the bride walks in, like point the camera at her and then just follow her in and then like zoom in a little bit and then just make sure it's recording and don't touch it. I'll come tell you when to stop recording. And so I'm just like wide-eyed, just like slowly. I'm like, this is probably the best tracking shot I've ever done in my career. Just like making sure I'm dead on her. And she gets down the aisle and, and said it ends up being fine, but that was a pretty crazy first experience. Like it's just pouring rain.
That's
like
that's a rough wedding.
It was similar to like the Forrest Gump scene, the dude like sitting on the mast, like, is this, I should call this a storm? There was people like who were just had, 20 Miller Lights deep, like swinging from the rafters.
It was bad. The wind and the rain, that was a rough one for a seasoned person. I forgot. I don't even know if I realized. I mean, I'm sure I did at the time, but in hindsight, I didn't even realize that was like your first.
That was the
not
first
only your first
ever
video, but like your first gig for me.
I promise you, I had never, ever, ever switched my camera over to video mode before then. And the night before the wedding, you had me over and you were like, all right, so this is what a rack focus is. And I was like, all right, rack focus, so I'm like at home, like racking on, like these terrible, slow, like crazy,
all jerky.
Yeah. I remember it's like, here's how to flip to video mode. Like, here's what your shutter speed needs to be. I'm pretty sure I still got it wrong. Like, here's how to do all that. I forgot most of it by the next day, but
so what were your thoughts after that gig? I mean, I'm sure that was probably an overload on all fronts. I mean, I'm sure just an information overload as well as just an environment, like here's some weddings.
Well, I mean, I think, the eye opener for that one was I was around 3 people, who were doing it, professionally like this. I mean, you and Kevin were working together at the agency at that point. So like, I kind of heard his deal and, he's a professional, you're a professional, Steven's a professional. And, funny enough, I don't know why I remember this comment out of, anything. So we're on the back porch eating because, we have to go eat like in the dark corner somewhere away from everybody.
Yeah, it was rough.
And Steven, it's towards the end of the night and you're kind of like, we were talking about how, it's almost, there's nothing really else going on. I remember you telling Steven like, all right, you just need to go home. You cost me the most of anybody here. So just go home. And I'm thinking like, dang, that man must be making millions. You know what I mean? So I'm like, maybe I can make money. So that was just another like random little moment where I'm like, he must be making good money, which he was. But yeah, so I mean that wedding just, from a bunch of fronts, it kind of showed me like there are people who are doing it professionally, there are people doing it full time, and you can actually like not can you only like survive, like you can make good money. So that kind of was a little bit of a turning point into starting to learn video and kind of rounding out like a skill set of actually being able to make money in a creative industry.
So, obviously you've kind of gotten your eye opened in probably 3 big events. And one was just kind of unlocking a little bit of the technical side of what your camera can do. Then people kind of believing in you. And I guess technically I'm included in that.
Yeah, 100%.
But then also realizing that there's a community of people already doing this out there. So kind of when you had all of that, at what point did you say, okay, I'm going to jump in with both feet into this as what was the next progression in your kind of photography world at that point?
Yeah. So,
because you're still at Naturally Outdoors.
Yeah. So a family friend came to me and, he had been seeing my work. He had noticed I'd done a couple little videos for Naturally Outdoors at that point after the wedding. And I'd been taking a lot of pictures. I had a Sony A7 by this point, my only venture out from Canon ever. He said, so what if I just paid you, what you're making here, and you just get to do photo and video? Like, let's start a business together where, I was also kind of making some websites at the time. And so he was like, what if we start a business where, it's just, I'll just kind of be the money and the connections, and you kind of, you just, you be the face and you do these services for people.
So was this more of like a creative agency type thing?
That's what it was. It was a media company. So the whole idea was we could offer, a website, and then we could fill it out for you. Basically, like, we'd write the copy, we would, do the photo.
A turnkey solution, if you will.
Yes. 100%. And it ended up not working out, and looking back, like I was very much not ready to like be in that scenario. I was too young. Like I
Were you
didn't,
20?
I
19?
was, I think I was 19,
Yeah.
maybe 20 at that point.
Sure.
And it just was not like, it was not the right time. And, I ended up getting a job offer from the agency you were at.
Mhm.
That through the connection of, knowing your wife and you kind of knowing me and seeing my work, you kind of recommended me and y'all ended up taking a chance on me. And, once that offer came through, I think, the partner in this business was kind of like, you need to go do that. Basically, like, that's going to
Mhm.
ultimately be better for you in the long run than
Because I remember,
this.
I remember this conversation, and not to share too much, but you were a little on the fence about it to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard thing to, when that job offer came through and when the conversations that with my partner we started having, it was kind of, I felt like it was a little too early to call it at the time. I was like, I just feel like we need a little bit longer to kind of try to make it work. And again, in hindsight, I really just was not ready for that yet.
Sure.
But in the moment, it was like, it was only like a month. I mean, truly, like we only gave it about a month. And again, it was it was the right call, but yeah, I was on the fence, and even when, my partner said, I think you should do it. Like I'm going to pull out of this, but I think you need to take that job opportunity. And so there was still a moment of like, maybe I should just go for it on my own. Like just kind of, just, like move back in with my parents and like, just kind of try to figure it out and go for it. But ultimately, like people were like, my parents and, other people were like, you need to take that job. So and I'm glad I took the job, very glad I took the job. And so, I remember having conversations with you and, the owner of the agency and, and both of y'all, y'all took the chance on me for sure. But yeah, ultimately went to work with you and Kevin Smith.
Yeah. And, at the end of the day, the biggest reason that, aside from, we had a need, I think that the biggest thing for me that you brought to the table at the time was, one, your personality. Like you're really easy to work with. I mean, even from the wedding and not knowing anything, you were very teachable, which was huge for me. But also, you, for whatever lack of technical skill, I could tell from everything that I had seen that you had put in the time and had an eye, right? And I know that's, maybe a little cliche to say, but like you had put in enough time to develop the way that Mike Baker shoots, right? Good, bad, and different. Like you had your style, and I'd say to anybody listening, that's really one of the biggest things that you can do, regardless of your equipment, is really put in some time to bring your photography style out, and then you can hone and refine later. So after you came to the agency, how long did you end up working there? 12, 14 months, somewhere in that
year
ballpark?
and 3 months, something like that.
Yeah. So I had left a little bit prior to you, but I guess, what do you think was your biggest takeaway from stepping into a position that maybe you didn't necessarily want, on paper, right? It's corporate work, right? It is 9 to 5, dress a certain way, do a certain thing, show up with a smile. But I guess from a business standpoint, or even just a technical standpoint, like, what do you think you got out of that season?
I mean, honestly, what you said earlier is that I'm teachable. I feel like I am very teachable. I don't like school. I had other people, tell me I'm teachable. And so I think that's why our relationship honestly like worked so well, because you're so good at teaching and you have so much information, you can convey it very well. And I'm just like a little sponge. I was like, like, sweet, teach me freaking everything. And I'll probably do it wrong 3 times, but then I'll never do it wrong again.
Sure.
So that, like, I think this is not necessarily my biggest takeaway, but like just, the biggest benefit was like you and I working next to each other. Like, so, I mean, I would, I'd film something and then you would be like, you'd come over and like rip it to shreds, and then I would, go do whatever, I need to do to fix it. But I mean, truly, like it was never like, this is terrible, you're not going to be good. It was like, here, let's make it better. Like, here's how to make it better, and here's why it's better. And I
Right.
feel like that one of the biggest takeaways for sure, there was so many takeaways, but like one of the biggest takeaways was if you're getting paid in a creative field in that capacity, like if you're an artist making money off of your art, that's different. But in this scenario where
Right.
you're working for an agency who's making content for other companies, you bring your sense of style to the table for sure. Do not get offended when it gets ripped to shreds. Don't color
Sure.
something in some trendy hip way. Like, just do it how if you want to get paid and make money, like do it how the client is going to like it.
And I think that's a really good point because, whenever you're kind of wanting people to hire you for a thing, like people will hire you because they like what you do, but there are always going to be some parameter that you have to kind of fit within. And I'm specifically talking the corporate
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Like if you go
Yeah.
out to any bank and they're like, we need a 90-second commercial about who we are.
Yes.
Right.
100%.
There are just certain rules that you're going to want to abide by to deliver a level of polish. And that's, take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But to your point, you're absolutely right. It's not that things are bad. It's just to fit this deliverable.
Yeah.
Let's make some tweaks.
Yeah, I mean, there was so many countless takeaways I had. Like, obviously, when I got there, I'd never seen like a C300 Mark II or a C2. I've never seen a cinema body before in person. So
It's so daunting. At
just
first.
like, remember, I ended up the second week in, I dropped the C300 Mark II off of a
forgot.
tripod directly onto the street. So we're filming like a big project, and we're
forgot.
riding around the van, and they tell me, hey, hop out with the tripod and grab this shot. And so what I didn't know was the tripod lock was broken, and it like I twisted it down, but it was pressed in still, like the little the safety lock.
Yeah.
And so like this dude is walking down the street. We're filming kind of in a little like somewhat sketchy area, and this dude comes like out of his house and he's kind of eyeballing me, and he's walking toward and I'm like, what's going on? And the people in the van are like, all right, like let's go, you know what I mean? So I grabbed the tripod without putting a hand on the camera, and that camera just like backflipped onto the asphalt. I mean, talk about a spine chilling.
Yeah, because you were not on the job long at all.
No, seriously, my second week. I mean, like legitimately my second week, right? I mean, and that thing hits the ground. So fortunately, it fell on. So like cinema cameras, at least on the Canon line, have most of the time have a little pad on the handle,
Right.
and it literally landed perfectly on that pad. And I was shooting on somewhat of a stubby lens, and so it didn't like hit and then hit the lens. So it kind of just like hit. And then just kind of just chilled, and the camera was completely fine. So I mean, but I'd already started walking home. I was like, this is it. Like I'll see y'all later.
Do you so I remember this, and I'm sure I'm guessing you might remember this too. But so I remember hearing the story. You guys got back. I was doing something different, but I remember the camera made it back into the studio, and it was like on a Friday.
Yeah,
right. It was over the weekend or something.
Yeah.
And, I ended up cutting.
I forgot about this.
I ended up cutting a clip. I took some of the actual footage,
some
that
like
you
dust
filmed.
or something.
Yeah, and I ended up pixelating it like just enough where it was kind of flashing on some
Yeah.
spots where like it just looked like it
Y'all
was
are terrible.
broken.
I forgot about this.
And I remember you coming back into work, and I let Kevin know what was going on. I was like,
Yeah,
Mike, like
this is
you
it.
gotta.
We're gonna get.
And
it.
I just remember the color of your skin just like completely going away and face dropping. I didn't let it go on like terribly long.
No, y'all did tell me. I'm surprised Kevin let that happen.
I was really surprised too. I'm surprised.
That's funny. No, I'd forgotten about that, but I do remember being like, oh my God.
All right, that's 15 grand gone.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm gonna leave now.
Yeah.
That's,
But even then, I mean, it was crazy. Even like the owner, I mean, our boss was just like, when it happened, he was like, yeah, I've dropped it before. I was like, okay. if that's what you say. So, that was pretty crazy. Not what you want to do in your second week of work.
So you spend 14 months,
Yep.
as you said, soaking it up, learning your stuff.
And I would say 6 months in, and I mean, you may have a different memory of this, but I feel like 6 months in, I could go on a shoot, not like the biggest of shoots, but like a little easy one-man shoot with, a couple interviews and some B-roll. And
Yeah.
I could do it. Like I remember being like, I could set up a light panel and, make sure my audio is okay. Like
Right.
at 6 months in, I could do
Well, we were also
smaller
doing
level
it for the
jobs.
most part day in and day out. And so
every single day.
you
from
know, if
8
we
to 5.
didn't have a shoot, then it was like, hey, all I want you to do is set the camera up
Yeah.
and learn how to tear
100%.
it down,
And not even just the camera. I mean, you were like, go set up the light stand so you know how to, because that's what people don't think about is all the little things that if you don't know how they work, just all those little seconds of trying to figure something out add up to so much time.
yeah, you want when you pull up on set for everything to be muscle memory.
Yeah,
To say,
100%.
okay, the light goes here, here's
The
how the
most
stuff
boring.
unlocks.
I remember Kevin telling me, hey, go grab an IEC. And I'm like, is that some kind of sandwich? Like what, like what? I have no clue what that, I have no clue what that is. And he was like, it's the little power cord. I'm like, awesome.
Yeah, you'll find in the video world, everything's got a name. I mean, if we'd have used real terms like, hey, go get a stinger, you'd have been like, what?
I
What?
still don't know what that is.
It is a single outlet extension cord.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I've literally never heard that.
There you go. Term of the day.
Perfect.
Stinger.
I'm gonna start using that on Derek.
Yeah. See how that goes.
I'm gonna say, go get me like a stinker or something. He's like, what are you? No clue what you're talking about.
Well, I think there's something to be said about partnering with people who are further along down the road from
Yeah.
you and really having just, prior when you were doing stuff on your own for National Outdoors, going backpacking
Yep.
and kind of getting your own time in, there's really only so much you can pull out of yourself.
Yeah.
Especially in the time that you put in. And I
Sure.
think that season, what I've seen come out of it was just a almost like a supercharged multivitamin, pump of just here's skill and knowledge and information. And
I
it's
mean,
so
yeah.
compressed, like a summer school course where you've got
Sure.
5 weeks
Yeah.
to make
To
it
figure it out.
happen.
Yeah. I mean, I went from, doing it like a good amount every day, like of shooting something with just photography and maybe a few Peter McKinnon vlogs or something
Mhm.
to, 3 people who have been doing it for a while, like teaching me every aspect
Yeah.
every single
At
day.
minimum 8 hours
I mean,
a day.
it's a pressure cooker. I mean, like it's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, so I left, I think
Yeah, we
maybe
left
about,
like a couple months apart. Like
yeah,
it
I
wasn't,
left maybe about 9 or 10 months
Yeah.
after you had started. And then you left a few months after that. When you left,
Yeah.
circumstances aside, what was kind of the next step for you? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No.
like what was it like being like, hey,
Sure.
I've got to figure something
so
out.
yeah, this is the start of the business, right? I mean, I remember leaving in an unexpected fashion. We'll leave it
Yep.
at that, right? And looking back, funny enough, it was never like I had no plans of starting a business. Like I went and talked to Scott at Naturally Outdoors and was like, is there any opening here?
Can I get the job
like,
back?
What do I do? But other than asking him that one time, I wasn't even like, I would have been upset about going to work there, but I was like, that's kind of a, back step.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, truly like it,
Like, were you nervous at all?
I don't
or-
remember being like, I'm not somebody, I attribute it to ignorance, but I'm not somebody who ever feels super nervous about things. And part of that is a stage of life. Like I don't have much to be nervous about. But also, I mean, I've not been skydiving, but my risk assessment in my brain is just, there's never much risk. Like, I mean, there's just like, I'm just like,
Sure.
it'll be okay. On some level, like it'll be all right. And that's a, pretty privileged thing to feel, just to feel completely safe with, in whatever scenario.
Sure.
But, I just always have kind of, something will work out.
So did you, when you were kind of in that stage of something
Yeah.
will
So,
work
I mean,
out,
to kind of back up a little bit. So when I started with the agency, like when I talked to the owner and I said, like, I've got these clients, right, who were, were Naturally
Right.
Outdoors and Bean Bar who were paying me $100 a month to shoot photos. And he was like, yeah, great. Do whatever. Just, so I had quote unquote clients. I think Naturally Outdoors was paying me, or they paid me for a while. They paid me like $250 a month or something. So like they were a
Mhm.
little bit more than $100, but like
but you were also doing more than just pictures for them, like a
yeah,
few
it
video
was a
clips here
little
and there
social
and
media stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, something like that, but, When I parted ways with the agency, it was unexpected, and I don't remember ever feeling nervous. And truly, I mean, I think, um, I had, a soft place to fall. My now fiance, we had a little apartment, like,
Mhm.
I was making from Bean Bar Naturally Outdoors like $350, and our rent was like $500. So it was like, cool, like we can at least pay the bills.
Right, right.
She had a job. So I was like, this is great. I'll just, you just be the sugar mama. I'll hang out, like, this is awesome. No. So, I mean, truly, I mean, there wasn't much doubt. And honestly, even for her, looking back, I'm like, why wasn't she just like, go get a job? But I mean, there wasn't any doubt for either of us. It was just kind of like
It's kind of like, this feels natural.
like, here's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Like, go do the business.
Well, that was one of my biggest encouragements for you for taking the job, was just to be able to learn the trade, and I would say that commercial video and photo, it's a trade in and of it. Yeah,
100%. And so I went into it, and I remember talking that first month. I remember calling Derek, and I had figured out this new concept, and I was like, so when I first started, my thing was like, I'm going to make enough to like exist, and that's where I want to stop, and I'm just gonna hang out and have all the time in the world, which is awesome. Like, I think everybody should do that. I kind of want to go back to that, but it's like, I was gonna make my 30,000, and I was just gonna like be paddleboarding all the time. And I remember calling Derek and being like, I've got it figured out. I can compete on volume, charge people, I can way undercut, and just have a lot rather than having like 2 or 3 that were huge. And and truly, there wasn't really any doubt that this was going to work. Like, I mean, I just was like, this is what's going to happen. And I mean, and from that first, probably 2 weeks after that kind of unexpected little deal happened. So Robert Thomas, who's Greystone Properties, came to me and was like, hey, we want you to come take pictures. He jumped on as like a monthly retainer. So then I got him as a monthly. I got Natural Outdoors as a monthly. Bean Bar was a monthly. And they had bumped up in some price. And, so at that point I'm like, sweet, I'm making it, this is great. And at this point I was on a 6D Mark II. So I was, I had a 6D Mark II is a good camera.
Sure.
It's a great camera. And so I picked up a few monthly clients. And then, a couple months in, I picked up another great monthly client, Amanda Scott, Little Southern Wife.
Now, were you seeking people out, or were people coming to you? So at this point,
it's organic social media. So had a website. I was making my presence known. I was trying to post, be consistent, try to, have calls to action and all my things of like, hey, I really want, I want to work. And I remember, I did. So Jeff Felton, who believed in me very early on. I remember I went to him, and he's a Story Brand. I'm not sure what they call themselves, but he's a Story Brand member. He's a certified brand guide. That's what he is. He's a brand guide. So he hooked it up for free. He sat me down, and he made all my copy. He made like what problem I'm solving, this whole deal. So all my Instagram and Facebook and website at that point were all focused on the copy he made for me, which is a huge gift that he just gave to me for free. And I took a few photos in exchange, but like he definitely, that was huge. And so he hooked it up. And so I remember posting this post, so Amanda, Little Southern Wife is her brand, and she followed me, and I was like, oh, she would be a perfect person. She needs a lot of content, right? So I remember making a post that said something. This was the first time I ever like saw a return on something I was doing. This is a big business moment. If like I posted something about how like if you need content for your blogs, like let's talk. And so she messaged me immediately off of that post, and I was thinking like, all right, I have something that people want, people need. Does not seem to be here in Florence. And like, let's just start identifying people and rock it out. And my goal for the first year was to have like 8 monthly clients. And I think I got to 9. So, like it worked out great. I think my first year, I ended up making, after expenses and taxes, I ended up making about the same as what I was getting paid at the agency.
Which is fantastic.
It was crazy. After
my first year, I think I reported a loss. It was only like, $500 or $600 or something. But to be profitable and be profitable at at a level you had experienced before, that's huge for your first year.
Yeah. it was not just me. I mean, my fiance is a huge part of that. I mean, you were a huge part of that. My family, and there was a lot of people who were involved in making that, successful. And, but I mean, it was a better than I could have imagined first year. And, I'd got to the 9 monthly clients, but there was a lot of, one-off work with a lot of projects that came through that just, that didn't, that were not retainer deals. They were just projects.
So obviously, on paper, I wouldn't say that you're, a seasoned veteran businessman or anything, but
No.
you've come a long, long way from learning how to make people look like their head is, under your arm.
Yeah.
And, and to having a pretty successful content creation business. What do you think has changed from, I guess, that original fire of I just like taking pictures out in the mountains to, running a business? Is there anything that you can think of or kind of quantify, like good or bad? Like, is there anything that you would say, this is kind of the ugly part of running a business, or this is the best thing ever, everybody should do it?
Ultimately, I have to say this is the best thing ever. I mean, there are obviously days where you're like, I hate this so much. And then you have to look at your situation objectively and be like, okay, I have probably one of the best setups of anybody. And I will, touch on a little bit, like it did get a little, the only time I remember feeling nervous my first year, like truly, truly feeling like, up at night, like this is weird, is when the pandemic hit, because it was March and I was open, for business for 2 months at that point. And I was backpacking in Utah with Naturally Outdoors, and we came out of that trip to, the world has fallen.
Yeah. So y'all went in on that trip,
yeah,
and life was
none
good.
None of us really knew, what was going on.
And that trip was what, 7-10 days?
Yeah. We were in the backcountry for 10 days. Yeah.
And by the time literally, a day or two after you had come out, that's when everything had shut down. But, and feel free to speak on this. But the other thing is, because you're in the backcountry, like we couldn't get a hold of anybody.
No, I had no clue. So when I came out, I hadn't lost a client, but they had paused their contract.
Sure.
Which is understandable. But still it was like, dang, like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the straw I've drawn of, like I've very fresh business and the pandemic hits. But, interestingly enough, it ended up going the other way of people needed more digital content than ever because they could not communicate with their customers in person. So it was all of a sudden, it was, just like a rush to go digital. It was a rush to like make your social media good. And it was like the Wild West of social media for like, for 3 months. Like everything was getting dumb engagement, and like it was anything you posted was getting great views, and you were, like making sales off of, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, not a great way for it to happen, but it, for me, it did kind of go the other way. Because I had, set up my business as, not so much events and stuff like that, which unfortunately for a lot of my friends in the industry who, who were focused on weddings and events, a lot of that did fall through. I had kind of set myself up as, as more so content creation, as, as branding and, commercial corporate kind of work.
So, nearing the end of 21 at time of recording this, and you have, is this year 2?
Yeah, this is year 2.
So year 2, and all I have seen, as an outsider looking in, is just your business continuing to grow, continuing to develop the craft, and just your level and quality of work is continuing to go up as well. What do you kind of attribute that to?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, I was shooting every day, and I was shooting paid work, and that kind of accelerates, your learning as well, because you're having to produce at the level that they need you to.
Yeah. And to go back to your point, your client comes to you and says, hey, I want this. This is 100%. What I want pulled off. You pull it off.
And that's kind of, something I didn't realize till, later was, people were bringing me stuff and showing me like, hey, I want this. And so, obviously we didn't just rip that off, but it was, I did start to learn more lighting styles and more posing and stuff like that, because they were bringing me this. And, I'm like, who am I to tell you that, we're going to shoot it differently? Like, let's just do what you want. You know what I mean? Like, if that's what you want, it's what you want. So that was a big part too, was just, that kind of was just practice for me. I mean, there were definitely times people asked me to do stuff and I was like, oh yeah, I've done that a million times and I'd never, never done it before. That was, but then we'd figure I'd go home and YouTube it and figure it out. But,
Right.
and and you mentioned earlier that, when you're on your own, you're your own cap. And that definitely was something that I'm still trying to be very conscious of, is that, I am kind of like, there's no one above me where I'm working. Right.
Right.
So, I mean, like I'm responsible for my own growth. And so I've gone deep into classes. Like I've bought almost every Wildest Co class they've put out, and I've just, soaked in that content. Hours of YouTube channels, just countless education, talking to other professionals in the industry. Like, I mean, good Lord, I text you 300 questions a week, about how to do stuff. And
we'll start charging, start charging you minutes.
I mean, that's been the, just shooting every single day. I'm being very intentional with my growth in education.
Yeah. So it seems like, self-investment is pretty crucial, certainly in your business, but
100%.
What would you say to maybe anybody who is kind of like you were early on, just kind of on the fence about, do I go this way or that, like in photography, like maybe somebody or video, somebody who's kind of on the fence about really just giving it a shot. Like what would you say from being in, I understand that it's only 2 years, but you've also had to make that decision at several points prior to that with going to Natural Outdoors, switching from Ranger to being in this content world. And then even the step up from there of saying, okay, now I'm going to go do this with other actual professionals to now I'm going to do it on my own. I mean, you've had to make that transition in multiple ways, but several times already before even getting into your own business. And now that you're in it, what do you think you would say to maybe anybody who might be kind of riding that fence?
I think I would tell you to go for it. I think, be smart about it. There's no reason, obviously get your job done. But if you're working somewhere, I mean, just shoot when you get off work. Like, even if you have a little client who's paying you a couple $100 a month, like just, if the schedule aligns with them, like, when you get off at 5, go to their business at 5:30 and shoot some content,
Right.
Shoot on the weekends. I mean, that's the thing, is you kind of have to sacrifice at some point. If you want to truly do it, you kind of have to just suck it up. And if you want the freedom and the ability to do it full time down the road, like at some point you do have to just work. I would say go for it, but be smart about it. There's no reason, at least in my opinion, to just go in, both feet in right off the gate. Just be smart about your entry into the business.
Yeah. And I mean, you've definitely done a lot of things a proper way where, I certainly did not, kind of when I started.
But I will say, and that's a huge part, is again, just the ability to have you who have, to be able to take your experience and you can tell me like, well, here's what I would have done differently, was huge. I mean,
yeah, and I think that just goes back to how teachable you are, and I would say to anybody listening, to, as best as you can, just be teachable, soak it in, and obviously put stuff into your own circumstances and your experience and the direction you want to go, but be teachable and don't ever feel like you've got it down, because usually when I feel like I've got it down, that's all of a sudden when I get I really start to plateau and my creativity doesn't go anywhere for a while. And then I have to take a couple steps back and be like, there's got to be somebody who's doing it better or different. And how do I find it? What's the next thing that's going to get me over
So this is a really weird way to think about it, but this is what's in my brain. So my dad, I used to watch I used to watch Westerns with my dad all the time. Like that was like, I watched a ton of John Wayne. I mean, like we watched Wagon Train, but Bonanza, the whole, we watched all these.
That's why you like Culture Wall so much.
Yeah, exactly. We watched all these Western shows. And for whatever reason, there was always that, there's always that saying of like, someone's always faster. And for some reason that like, when they're speaking to like a gunfight or something, but for some reason, like that's in my head. And you got to be careful because you don't just want to be down on yourself and think you're not good. And, but truly there is a part of my brain where I'll watch something. And I think every creator does this to a point, and you just pick it apart and you're like, this is terrible. This is awful. And the client watches it and they're like, this is amazing. This is the best thing I've ever seen. But I think that's kind of important. Like, again, don't just rag on yourself, but on some level you have to know that if you're not working to get better, someone will beat you. And I mean, it's just as, if you want to let them beat you, then fine, but just accept that that's what's going to happen. But I mean, on some level, you have to just kind of know that there always is somebody better. And, and ultimately, if you're not continuing to grow, you're just going to get left behind.
And I would say that yes, 100%. I think that's also kind of a dance within creating community in this space as well, because
for sure, that's
I think it's a huge disservice to ourselves to pursue that next level, but also shut people out in that pursuit to say, I know you're better and faster, so I'm going to write you off or shut you out. Or even if you're, quote, lesser, I'm not going to give you the time of day. And I think that is something that we can all benefit from, is just share what you know, and try to learn from who you can.
And again, I think it's on the people asking you the questions. Like, I'm never going to tell somebody what my pricing is unless it's somebody I like really, really trust and know. Like,
sure.
If you're going to somebody for mentorship, like, just be really careful with your questions. Like, I have had people come to me and basically be like, "Hey, what's your structure?" And I'm like, "Nah, not a chance,
right.
dude."
That's not. Yeah, that's not mentorship. That's That's peeking behind the curtain a little too much.
And again, if somebody tells you, and you can speak this a little bit, people did, tell you no when you reached out to them for information, which is pretty wild. But people have reached out to me, and I just have not, I just haven't had time and not gotten to it. But if they tell you no, and this is actually a business practice or tip that I learned pretty early on. If somebody tells you no, it's probably not just like no forever. It's just not right now. Like, I mean, truly,
that's a great point.
If you reach out, and that was something I think I learned from Alex Stroll in one of the Wildest Code classes. I mean, it was truly like, I remember hearing that and like, dang, that's great. I mean, if somebody tells me no in business, I reach out like 6 months later, and I've actually had it be like, yeah, sweet, let's do it. But that goes into asking for mentorship as well. I mean, if somebody tells you, and not they're going to tell you flat out no, but if they don't answer what you want, like, odds are it's not like a no forever. It's just hey, I'm really busy right now, and I'm sorry, I just don't have the time.
Sure.
So just be persistent. That was also something I feel like I did with mentorship and with I'm trying to do in business.
Still call me.
Be persistent and bug the heck out of people.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. I hadn't really thought about that prior. I've had those same experiences where, it's like, yeah, we'll keep you in mind, and you think, oh, that's never gonna pan
interesting,
out, and then it does.
Yeah, for 100%. And this concept was reinforced because Roberta, my fiance, is on the other side. Like, so she's in a marketing position where she hires people for gigs. And I remember her telling me, she was like, yeah, like, if I tell somebody no, like, most of the time I'm being genuine, like, we can't do it for this project, but like, we're not just not hiring you forever. Like, we reach back out, so that was kind of, seeing somebody on the other side of like seeing somebody that's the kind of person I'm reaching out to, that was a pretty big lesson. So,
what is the next steps for, Second Floor Media at this point?
Third Floor Media, for
Third floor, going up.
Nobody take that name.
Copywritten.
It's genius.
But for real, like, what is the next phase kind of look like for you for business?
Well, I can only answer that with what I'm thinking right now, right? Like,
sure.
I mean, it may change tomorrow, but right now, what I want is a small agency. Like, I want 1 to 2 more people on my team so we can do some slightly bigger jobs with, this is some advice you've given me, is like a list of like 5 to 10 really good contractors that I can pull in on jobs. But that's kind of where I want to be. I don't have any personal desire to get to a point where, I have 10 employees and I'm just managing people and I'm working all the time, and the money's
so the
great.
Shooting is still a big priority for you personally.
I go back and forth on that. Even if I had 2 other employees. So I think another lesson I've tried again from a Wildest Co thing is I think it's from, anyway, it's not important, but they talked about if you're it basically not saying you obviously everybody has weaknesses, but don't think about your weaknesses like that you just can't do it. Think about it like there's somebody else who could do it better. And I think that's something that I've tried to do is if I have the budget and if it works out, like, I'll try to hire the best person for whatever the case may be. So, I could definitely see a point where I'm, like I get to where I just don't, I shoot what I want to, but I'm not shooting every day. And like, I'll hire some really talented people and I'll just be the business side of it. Like I'll be bringing in work and, project management, hand it to the people who are shooting it and, let them crank it out.
It's a pretty wild ride is what it seems like, going from, just a kid with creativity in the household to really kind of honing in on a pretty passionate hobby and saying, all right, I can do this. Not only do I have confidence in myself, other people have it in me.
Yeah.
And here we are, a couple years in, business is good so far, so good. And it doesn't seem like there's any signs of slowing down. So, man, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for everybody who
thank y'all so much.
If you are on YouTube, thanks for watching. I think everybody on every platform knows what to do. Follow, share, all the good things. If you have anything that you want to ask Mike or
send us a
expand
message.
on, send us a message on our Instagram or in the YouTube comments, and we'd love to follow up on that. And we will catch you guys on the next episode of the Good Grain Podcast.